our presentation. The topic of our presentation is perceptions on healthy and unhealthy romantic relationships among Vietnamese adults. The use of content analysis with the emphasis on the comparison across sectors. My name is Jill, Dr. Sirikantraporn from Fullbright University, Vietnam. And with me, I have a strong group of research assistants with their names presented here who have been helping me with this study and practically making this study possible. And here's the quick agenda of our presentation today. We'll start with a brief overview and intro of our study and our current research inquiry and research question, and a little bit about the method we used. And then we will go into the results and the discussion of the results. And lastly, we'll finish with the limitations and the next phase of our study. Here's a brief orientation of the country of our interest, Vietnam. Vietnam is located in Southeast Asia, bordering China, Laos, and Cambodia. With a population of over 96 million, considered 15th most populous in the world. With a history of French colonial rule from 1887 to 1954, and the reunification of Northern and Southern Vietnam in 1976, which has had major implications of the social, political, cultural changes and the modern development of Vietnam. Vietnam is considered a developing nation with lower to middle income, and also one of the fastest growing economies in the world in the 21st century. The government of Vietnam is the unitary single party of the Communist Party of Vietnam. Now the overview of the topic, why studying romantic relationships in Vietnam? First of all, it is a very understudied line of research in Vietnam. And also a lot of those studies have been done on intimate partner violence, and as well as other types of gender-based violence, including our previous study on gender-based violence, GBV, in Vietnam from the perspectives of the service providers. With our previous study, as well as previous studies on domestic violence and intimate partner violence in Vietnam, we are motivated to understand the health of romantic relationships from the ground up. From the previous GBV studies, one very important study that is nationwide, one of its kind in 2020, that found that 13% of women experience sexual violence from their partner, and 9% experience non-partner sexual violence. And also many victims did not report nor acknowledge intimate partner violence incidents. And our previous study on the perception and experiences of GBV service providers also found some consistent findings with the previous studies, indicating that the root cause of the GBV, or gender-based violence, is gender inequality, inequity, and rigid gender norms, which are often hidden and silenced in Vietnam and have impacts on how Vietnamese adults or even adolescents form and perceive interpersonal relationships. Considering how important culture and values and norms are in terms of how people perceive and develop attitudes around romantic relationships and romantic relationship behaviors. And also, together with Vietnam's population having been experiencing extensive changes in the demographic structures, which then also affect dating, marriage, family formations, with notable gender differences in couplehood, marital status, Females in urban Vietnam are having increasingly more economic and financial independence than in previous generations, and these are affecting how many have delayed marriages, also increased divorces and separation, especially among females. Domestic violence also has been listed as one of the prominent reasons for separation, which is quite different from previous generations. The previous studies indicate that there is a need for more understanding of the Vietnamese adults' perceptions on what constitutes a healthy romantic relationship, from the process of romantic relationship development to maintenance and dissolution of a romantic relationship. Also, there's a need for work to reduce stigma around questioning about and evaluating the health of romantic relationships and what it means to build a healthy one, and also what it means to recognize unhealthy signs of romantic relationships. Considering how influential cultural norms, values, and beliefs around romantic relationships are in the health of the relationship, we would like to explore these norms and values and beliefs in the form of people's perception about how they view healthy versus unhealthy romantic relationships. And that is our research question. What are the perceptions of healthy and unhealthy romantic relationships among Vietnamese adults? The method that we use is content analysis. Content analysis was used to analyze open-ended questions from the newly developed short survey collected via Google Form. This portion of the study used the same content analysis methods used in my previous published article when analyzing similar online survey responses. To begin with, independent raters examined the written responses to the two open-ended questions. One, how do you know that you have a healthy romantic relationship? Two, how do you know that you have an unhealthy romantic relationship? Each of the raters read and coded all the responses independently. The raters highlighted statements that reflected any thoughts around healthy and unhealthy romantic relationships as emerging themes. Then the raters met and discussed the findings of themes that emerged both in pairs as well as in big groups to finalize prominent themes that emerged across the raters. And then here's a little bit of the descriptive findings. We received and analyzed the total number of 101 respondents. The majority of the respondents are in the young adulthood age range 18 to 25, and the majority of respondents identified as female, and the majority of respondents identified as residing in Ho Chi Minh City.
And next, we will present to you our results and discussion. First, we will go through the indicators of a healthy romantic relationship. We have 7 main categories. In order, they are communication, equality and compatibility, respect, support and care, self-growth, trust, time, and commitment. And here is a visual representation of the data. For our first category, communication, we have 5 subcategories: listening, understanding, thoughtfulness, connection, and constructive. The fact that communication came up as the most prominent here is not very surprising. They're actually quite congruent with the previous literature that we have on relationship. So, for example, your information, communication is a make or break factor, meaning that the relationship formation depends on whether communication works smoothly. During relationship escalation, communication would facilitate an increase in intimacy, and during maintenance, communication would move pair apart, which results in higher ease of communication and also higher partner satisfaction. It is also through communication that we would resolve conflicts, and respond when our partners fail to meet our expectations. For our second category, we have equality in compatibility. Some main themes are being reciprocal, sincerely, and dealing with hardships together. We have respect, including respect difference, independence, and respect each other's time. For our fourth category, we have support and care, including the feeling of being cared for, feeling loved, happy, supportive, empathy, and also generosity. And at the fifth place, we have self-growth. So for example, there is the idea of developing yourself, being your true self, and increasing your self-esteem. And finally, we have trust as our sixth category, and time and commitment is our last category. And also we ask for indicators of the opposite, meaning what they think an unhealthy romantic relationship would look like. So we found also 8 main categories along with miscellaneous categories. So we found lack of trust, negative feelings, inequality and incompatibility, hurt and abuse, lack of self-growth, lack of support and care, bad communication, and also lack of respect. This is a visual representation, and these are 2 categories that we highlight to discuss further later on. So for category 1, lack of trust, we found subcategories like hiding things, discomfort and worries, and dishonesty and lies. For negative feelings, we had, for example, feeling cold, feeling controlled, feeling unhappy, or exhausted. And so we found that being vulnerable or insecure had a very big difference among women and men. Only one male participant mentioned this as a sign of unhealthy relationship. And we think this has connections to intimate partner violence, because Vietnamese victims of intimate partner violence share major similarities with those globally. This means that most of the victims are girls and women. And so we also got a decrease in women's acceptance of violence recently. And so we hypothesized that the fact that they mentioned this as a sign of unhealthy relationship is indicative of how they are not accepting violence recently. So for category 3, inequality and incompatibility, we found some categories, for example, exploitation, apathy, inequality, and taken for granted. For hurt and abuse, we found controlling, creating violence, dominating, gaslighting. And then for lack of self-growth and lack of support and care, we found, for example, cannot express oneself, or bad influences, or also lack of action, or being too much selfish. So in the category lack of self-growth, we observed the biggest sex difference. And we think that this may be because in the traditional ideal romantic relationship, it would be harmonious and stable, and the women would have the duty to prioritize their male partner development. So for example, they may adopt their male partner's social circle into their own social network, or they may have to give up on their career and education so that they can prioritize the man's development. In other case, women would have to submit to the male's ideas. So for example, they would adopt the man's political opinions, or they would convert to the man's religion. However, a more modernized ideal models of romantic relationship would emphasize gender equality and women's liberation via career independence and success. I think that this may be the reason why lack of self-growth is a big red flag for women, but it's not recognized as a big threat for men. And also we noticed how sacrifice came up in the data. So sacrifice, or teaching in Vietnamese, is an ethical practice that helps substantiate local social moral order, and it naturalizes inequality as ethical. They also found that existing literature mentions how sacrifice in Vietnam is not about just warfare, like patriotic acts or religious rituals, but it also manifests in domestic settings. And so similar to what I mentioned in the last category, we think that how women mentions too much sacrifice as a sign of unhealthy relationship, that's a potential way of challenging the traditional discourse of women having to sacrifice for a relationship. And then for the last 2 categories, bad communication, we found ignorance, incompatible communication. Also for lack of respect, we found lack of consent or being disrespectful. And miscellaneous, we found oversharing on social media, big ego, overthinking, and bad sex. And we wanted to know how social media manifests in the miscellaneous categories because social media in existing literature around relationship are only mentioned as a route to potentially harmful behaviors. So partners might come to social media for other partners or having affairs. But in this data, female participants mentioned something different. They mentioned how overexposure of the relationship on social media can be one route to relationship destruction. And we think that we might need further research or further deep diving to understand how this relates to maybe cultural values or how female participants might not be able to share or display their relationship status on public platforms like social media.
Now I would like to share with you some of the limitations and strengths of our current study and also our plans for the next phase of the study. Some of the strengths of our current phase of the study are related to how the findings of the study from the content analysis approach really allow for anonymous sharing, meaning that the respondents share their perspectives without being identified. So they felt quite free to share their thoughts and their understanding of relationships. And also, the findings of this study also allowed for the preliminary understanding of the respondents' perceptions on some of the important characteristics associated with healthy versus unhealthy relationships in Vietnam, which might also suggest potential benefits that are worth further and deeper exploration. And with the strength of the content analysis comes with also a common limitation. The main one is that we were not able to verify, or ask for more elaboration on the themes that we captured, because the participants just responded to the comments today without any personal information. So, informed by this current study, of the next phase of our study will be these two components. First, in-depth interviews using ground theory, especially with the themes identified in this study, suggesting some gender similarities and gender differences in the perceptions between females and men, as well as some cultural nuances that may be present and prominent in Vietnam when it comes to romantic relationships. And the second component is the correlational and predictive analysis, using some of the established and well-identified scales of factors associated with the quality of romantic relationships. Some of the skills have been done and collected in countries outside of Vietnam. So we propose to validate and establish some of the reliability and validity of these skills, and also some of the potential correlations of these factors on the quality of relationships we build. Thank you so much for your attention and interest. Much appreciation from all of us at the Psychology Research Lab. And here are some ways that you can connect with us for any updates and also exchange of ideas. Thank you.